Okay, we're going to continue reading the article. This is part 2. The article is entitled Special Access Programs, a look at secrecy levels and the Pentagon's missing trillions by Joel van der Resden. First published September 10th, 2005. Last update January 30th, 2018. On the website, the Institute for the Study of Globalization and Covert Politics. So we're going to continue with part 2. And we are reading all levels of U.S. and NATO secrecy. Below, a chart can be found of all secrecy levels described in this article. Category, additional levels of compartmentalization, secrecy levels. A USAP is a hidden behind another SAP or USAP combined with the protection the private industry enjoys. Waived, unacknowledged special access programs or deep black programs. Unacknowledged special access programs or black programs. Acknowledged special access programs, top secret sensitive compartmented information, TSSCI, and basic secrecy levels or top secret, secret and confidential. Top secret is a NATO cosmic top secret, secret is a NATO secret, and confidential is NATO confidential. Public or semi-public for official use only. NATO restricted. Unclassified is NATO unclassified. The Pentagon's missing trillions, defense contractors, and cost overruns. A good start to get a sense if the U.S. government is properly managing its SAPs, USAPs, waived USAPs, and maybe even its USAPs within USAPs, would be to take a look at its bookkeeping. As it turns out, especially for the Pentagon, this is the biggest disaster ever. From 1998 to 2002, each year between $1 trillion and $3.4 trillion was reported unaccounted for. An oversight has been created below. Click on the source to read the original news report. 1998, $3.4 trillion reported by the Washington Times. 1999, $2.3 trillion, Department of Defense. 2000, $1.1 trillion, GAO of Congress, Insight Magazine. 2001, $2.3 trillion, CBS Quoting, Rumsfeld. 2002, $1+ trillion, San Francisco Chronicle and CBS News. 96 to 2011, $8.5 trillion, Reuters. Yes, we're really talking trillions, not billions. In 2001, Insight Magazine put these numbers best in perspective when it wrote, "Consider that if Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and the Bush team at the Pentagon had that $1.1 trillion today, it could buy 244 Nimitz-class aircraft carriers at a cost of $4.5 billion each, 19,298 F-18Es F-Super Hornet flyers at a cost of $57 million each, or 343,750 Bradley fighting vehicles at a total cost of $3.2 billion. Furthermore, using a reasonable estimate of $3 billion, the $1.1 trillion that is unaccounted for could pay for the construction of 367 brand new Pentagon buildings, or 7 Pentagons per state. On average, the Pentagon couldn't account for about 25% of its annual budget. This is a problem that has existed for decades. Remember that in 1985, the President's Blue Ribbon Commission on Defense Management, better known as the Packard Commission, was set up after the Pentagon was found to have paid $285 for a screwdriver, $37 per screw, $469 for a wrench, $435 for a hammer, $2,200 for a monkey wrench, $659 for an ashtray, $640 for a toilet seat, $7,600 for a coffee maker, and $74,165 for an aluminum ladder. Unsurprisingly, already in that period, billions were getting lost in the Pentagon bureaucracy. Beginning in 1996, the first year the Pentagon was forced to audit its books, renewed criticism on Department of Defense spending began to arise. This only increased when the War on Terror began. Afghanistan and Iraq were invaded, and the Pentagon received major budget increases despite continuing to report these scandalous trillion-dollar gaps in its books. Part of the pressure also came from the new online conspiracy community. Guests of the scammy million-dollar radio show Coast to Coast AM network of national security scrolls had also picked up on these deficits, falsely claiming that hundreds of billions of missing dollars most likely were diverted to secret space programs. We're talking about unfortunate individuals as Stephen Greer, Catherine Austin Fitts, Michael Sella, Richard Dolan, and others, starting around 2005. The 9/11 truth community falsely began to claim that the Pentagon impact was carried out to hide the Department of Defense's financial misconduct. Catherine Austin Fitts, as a director of the secretive 911truth.org umbrella group, may well have played a key role in the surfacing of this theory, which doesn't hold water at all. Why? Because only the offices of the Naval Operations Center and accounting budget offices of the National Guard and Army Reserve were destroyed. That's only a small part of the entire Pentagon budget. Also, the problem has existed before and since 9/11. In March 2005, Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, a favorite among 9/11 truthers, famously confronted Donald Rumsfeld and new Pentagon Comptroller Tina Jonah about these deficits. McKinney's fringe congressional ally, the chemtrail-promoting Dennis Kucinich, another huge favorite of the Alex Jones and 9/11 Truth crowd, also criticized the trillion-dollar gaps, explaining to liberal CIA outfit National Public Radio, as the ranking Democrat on a subcommittee which has jurisdiction over national defense and oversight subcommittee, I know the kind of waste that goes on in the military. I know, for example, that the Department of Defense cannot reconcile $1 trillion in accounts. I know they can't keep track of the cost of various contracts that go to the private sector. President Bush, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, and Pentagon Comptroller Dov Zakheim all promised to integrate the apparently hundreds of different budgetary systems within the Pentagon. But right from the beginning, left-wing liberal CIA media outlets as The Guardian voiced suspicion that these individuals had no interest in fixing the budgetary problems because private sector contractors as Lockheed, Northrop, and General Dynamics, these men themselves and various other government officials were linked to the problem they supposedly were trying to solve. It really doesn't seem to matter how big cost overruns are within the defense industry, Pentagon nexus, nobody ever goes to jail. Cost overruns, Cost overruns actually are a very long-standing problem going back further than the 1985 President's Blue Ribbon Commission on Defense Management and the $600 toilet seats it investigated. Already in the mid-1970s, the Pentagon's cost overruns were estimated at a whopping $355 billion. Already in the mid-1970s, the Pentagon's cost overruns were estimated at a whopping $355 billion. At the time, it was reported that overruns for Pentagon weapons had become such a routine item of military budgeting that many frustrated critics have turned away to other problems. The well-known Admiral Hyman Rickover was calling for extreme measures against military contractors, claiming that contractors deliberately spend more than estimated and then file overrun claims that also include enough for profit. Litton Industries, Lockheed, and Boeing were all mentioned as examples of defense contractors running programs with major cost overruns, respectively 42%, 31%, and 823%. Tellingly, it was found that 95 top officials of Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld had taken illegal gratitudes from defense contractors. An overlapping problem here was that individuals with high-level jobs in the defense industry love to take decision-making posts at the Pentagon and wind up buying equipment from their former employers. It appears little has changed over the years, and may even have gotten worse. Certainly when George W. Bush, once again flanked by a certain Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, initiated the war on terror in 2001, in the post-9/11 world, these defense contractors received huge contracts, with the Pentagon conveniently still not properly keeping track how much money they handed out. Dick Cheney's KBR Halliburton and Eric Prince's Blackwater Group, an admitted CIA front, are probably the most notorious examples from the Bush era of questionable defense contractor use, but many other companies benefited from the war on terror. How about the NSA having the in-house developed thin thread spy program ready to go for just $3 billion in 2001, but replacing it with the $3 billion Trailblazer boondoggle? Trailblazer offered a little to nothing more and even eliminated constitutional privacy rights, which Thin Thread did not. Much of it appears to have been a ploy by NSA Director General Michael Hayden, a superclass member, and other top executives to keep defense contractors as SAIC, Boeing, and IBM happy. And where do these top NSA executives end up with? Exactly at top defense contractors they early handed all kinds of contracts to. Or how about Lockheed developing a special ammunition round for the Navy's new Zumwalt stealth destroyer class that went from an estimated less than 50,000 each to an incredible 800,000 apiece? That's a 1,700% increase. It left the Navy with a $4 billion ship with no guns to fire, as it simply would be too costly to do so. There are plenty of other examples of significant cost overruns. Take the new $13 billion USS Gerald R. Ford supercarrier, the first of its kind. It's an amazing, eventually necessary piece of equipment, but by the time it is fully operational, about 3 years late and probably about 33% over the initially projected cost. It even prompted Senator John McCain, a notorious war hawk, an absolute top superclass member, to proclaim, "The Ford-class program is a case study in why our acquisition system must be reformed. Unrealistic business cases, poor cost estimates, new systems rushed to production, concurrent design and construction, and problems testing systems to demonstrate promised capability. After more than $2.3 billion in cost overruns have increased its cost to nearly $13 billion, the taxpayers deserve to know when CVN 78 will actually be delivered, how much developmental risk remains in the program, if cost overruns will continue, and who is being held accountable." When we move over to the Air Force, we see a similar pattern. The F-22 stealth fighter initially was supposed to replace the entire aging F-15 fleet. Over the course of a decade, development costs doubled from 13 to 26 billion, real unit costs from 149 million each to 412 million. The number of produced F-22s went from a desired 750 with production beginning in 1994 to about 190 when production was shut down in 2012. This left the Air Force to rely on the old F-15 and F-16 for air superiority. This is apart from a number of major technical shortcomings that aren't solved until the 2016-2021 period. I will conclude there, and we will pick this up on recording number 3. Thank you.